Fans Beyond Wrestling and fans of WSU, this is Denver, Colorado, the man, not the place. We're going to be doing a little bit of a podcast with Thomas Holzerman and Leslie Lee of the Wrestling Blog and Dirty Dirty Sheets, respectively, two enthusiasts not only of intergender wrestling, but also female professional wrestling. So, guys, I want to thank you for taking the time today, joining me on this podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is a great opportunity to get some of the word out.
Sure, and obviously with change in management, there's been some questions, some concerns. I'd like to use this opportunity to address some of them. So if you guys have any questions or anything you'd like to discuss, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, I have something off the bat. You had announced that the tournament for tomorrow, then the second tournament for tomorrow would be wholly intergender, and I'm wanting to know, was that idea in place before or after all the things with WSU, this whole merger and buyout started to take place?
Believe it or not, that idea was actually in place before we ever had any dealings with WSU. The WSU deal only started coming together on the, I want to say, Tuesday, May 29th is the first time that anything had started coming together in regards to that. And obviously the tournament for tomorrow announcement had come before it. So it's just coincidental. But I mean, obviously, again, with the tournament for tomorrow announcement, representing Beyond Wrestling, myself personally, we have an interest in women's wrestling. So it's just cool the way that it's worked out.
Yeah, Beyond has, of course, had a lot of women, a lot of intergender matches. Could you just tell fans personally what it is about women's wrestling and intergender wrestling that you find interesting?
Well, it's funny because I hate to even classify it as intergender wrestling, women's wrestling, men's wrestling, or anything like that. I like good wrestling. I like wrestling that is exciting, that is entertaining, that is somewhat provocative, that pushes the envelope, that is progressive. I mean, at this time of my life, I'd have to imagine that I've probably watched in the range of 10,000 matches, being a lifelong fan, and I want to try and help create the type of wrestling that I like. And it just so happens, with these intergender matches, to me, wrestling is all about expectations. And when fans come to a certain match with certain expectations, based on the way that match plays out, sort of affects the way that they like it or not. And I think that there's an entirely different set of expectations as far as intergender wrestling and female wrestling is concerned that hasn't been explored as much as men's wrestling. So that's certainly what's most appealing to me. On top of that, Beyond Wrestling was started to give professional wrestlers an opportunity to prove that they are skilled competitors, to give them the platform, to give them the tools that they need to try and move on in the world of wrestling. And that's not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily intended to be limited to men. So, if we can do that now with the WSU acquisition, even though we're going to be keeping WSU a separate brand, obviously I would like to continue to do so and continue to make sure that we have a viable platform to give athletes the opportunity to show just how talented they are.
With WSU coming under your fold, are you planning on keeping the business association with NCW Femmes Fatale going?
Yes, absolutely. And I've actually gone back and forth with them a few times via email, and that is a relationship that will continue. And just as we have many relationships with Beyond Wrestling, obviously I'd like to try and build more relationships with the WSU brand as well.
And just going back a little bit, can you just tell anybody who doesn't know why it is that you decided to buy WSU Wrestling specifically?
Sure. I mean, again, it just seemed like a really good opportunity. WSU has a lot of visibility. Somebody had questions as far as based on independent wrestling without contracts and stuff like that. If you wanted to run a girls promotion or promotion using female professional wrestlers, why wouldn't you just start your own? Especially if WSU is going to be going out of business, since a number of these competitors would be looking for work. And what it boils down to is the WSU brand provides something completely unique. Than any other type of female professional wrestling organization that I've come across. And on top of that, just sort of regionality based on where I feel comfortable promoting live events. WSU, that's where they're primarily located. So it just seemed like it would be a good fit. Also, I'd never had any personal dealings with Sean McCaffrey, the previous owner of WSU. However, John Harder, who's both a manager in Beyond Wrestling and a commentator at WSU, was sort of the initial link. He put us in contact, and then Sean McCaffrey, who's been a staple of the Northeast wrestling scene for a number of years was able to follow up with some of the guys that compete on the Beyond Wrestling roster just to see if he thought that Beyond Wrestling and WSU would be a good fit together. So he's been very protective of the brand. I have a lot of respect in that regard. For not only the fans of the wrestlers, but it's my intent to continue to treat the brand the way that it deserves to be treated, and hopefully even improve it from that aspect.
You're inheriting a roster that contains some of the most talented wrestlers in the United States, if not the world, including Jessica Havoc, who pretty much is the new hotness right now. She has recently competed for Anarchy Championship Wrestling. You get the rest of the Midwest Militia, Sassy Steppy and Allison Kay, obviously at Mercedes. Um, how are they going to be integrated into the Beyond family? Is there any plans for them to say come over to Beyond Wrestling, or is it, or when you say it's going to remain separate, are you going to have maybe like a separate brand and a separate brand for you at WSU, and maybe there's some crossover there, so it isn't a complete immersion?
I think I'd like there for to be continuity between the two organizations, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be any crossover to start. Obviously, the tournament for tomorrow is going to be a big deal for both Beyond Wrestling and WSU now, and having the two brands being able to promote it. I think that it's important to keep both brands separate, but make sure that both are featured as importantly. It's not like Beyond Wrestling is going to be the A show and WSU is going to be the B show, as we've seen with Raw and SmackDown. I do want to keep them two separate entities, but again, I want to make sure that there's continuity between the two for when we do have the opportunity to have some crossover. I would love for some of the female competitors in WSU to come over to the Beyond Wrestling to compete against the men on the live shows, and perhaps vice versa. But that's not something that we've gotten too far because unfortunately, I don't know if you know this, the way that it worked out is, again, this deal only came together at the end of May. All the way back to February, we had a split show announced with St. Louis Anarchy and AIW in Cleveland on 6/16, which was the day of the Uncensored Rumble, the last show that Sean McCaffrey was going to be in charge of. So the representatives from Beyond Wrestling, with the exception of John Harder, weren't even able to attend that event. So it's still in the process of trying to build that rapport with the current female competitors on the WSU roster, and I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some that are open to it. I mean, Allison Kay got her first big break wrestling Jefferson Saint at Beyond Wrestling. Before that, she had only competed primarily for an organization known as BCWA in somewhere around Michigan, somewhere around Detroit. And Marty Bell has recently joined up with the Beyond Wrestling roster. And I mean, there's been other competitors, female competitors in Beyond Wrestling. I mean, who's to say that they won't pop up in WSU going forward?
All right. Yes, a couple questions back, you mentioned that WSU was a unique product amongst the different women's wrestling organizations out there. What is it to you that makes WSU stand out from, say, a Shimmer or a Femme Fatales or the American Joshi Division ACW or the Chikara Women's Division?
I think that based on everything that I've seen from WSU, and obviously I'm somewhat familiar with the product, or else we wouldn't have been investing in it. It seems like there is a much greater focus on storylines, personalities, more so than just the actual in-ring action. Obviously, that is very important, but I want to sort of continue using some of these other aspects in professional wrestling besides what happens inside the ring to be able to continue to push the envelope. I know that there's somewhat more of an adult content, and I think that there's definitely a fine line to walk between being, let's say, creative and being offensive, and that is something that I will be keeping a closer eye on. But I do want to make sure that the female competitors see a good amount of freedom as the male competitors have on the Beyond Wrestling side of things. I mean, Shimmer obviously, they bring in worldwide competitors. I think I'm more interested with WSU in trying to discover some great competitors that maybe a worldwide audience is not yet familiar with and help them get to that level. But that's not to say to rule out any options of being able to work with, some Joshi talent down the line, maybe some female competitors from Mexico or Europe.
Um, as I mentioned before, you have inherited a lot of good things at WSU, and I agree that their sort of focus on storyline is what sets them apart, makes them different from, say, a Shimmer. However, you're also inheriting a lot of baggage. And McCaffrey has gone off on Twitter a little bit and there's criticism as to how he has run, how he's presented it. What do you plan on doing to improve that? Are you going to reach out to the people he's offended, or are you just going to let sleeping dogs lie? What's your plan of action?
Sure. I mean, firstly, and I think that a lot of Sean's very outspoken. Um, And I think that a lot of the sort of criticism that's been directed towards him has been primarily based on Twitter. Just to give you guys a heads up, when 7/16 comes around and Sean is no longer with the organization, we will launch a new Twitter account at that time. I believe that Sean is going to change the name of his Twitter account just to reflect his himself personally. Since a lot of the people that do follow the WSU Twitter account aren't women's wrestling fans, they're not WSU fans. They're just people that know him personally. So in that aspect, we're going to be starting the Twitter from scratch and hopefully using some of our other social media outlets to be able to push that existing fan base back to that new account so that way they can get, all of the latest information. In regards to people that may have been burned in the past by their WSU dealings, all I can ask is that they would give WSU another opportunity based on the fact that I think that Beyond Wrestling, while it's not as visible to the fans and not as visible publicly, I feel, and I could be off base on this, that we have a very good reputation internally in terms of trying to work with different organizations. I mean, the last year alone, we have partnered up with Interspecies Wrestling, the New England Pro Wrestling Academy, which is the school affiliated with Chaotic Wrestling in New England, obviously St. Louis Anarchy, Absolute Intense Wrestling, Chikara, and there's plans to partner up with other organizations going forward. Obviously now WSU, in terms of who Beyond Wrestling is partnering up with. So I just hope that people would keep an open mind and realize that with new management comes new opportunities.
All right, and speaking of having an open mind, I actually got a chance to talk with Jessica Havoc, your champion, this weekend about the you purchasing WSU, and she told me that at first she was nervous, as anybody would be, as any wrestler would be, with a new promoter coming in. But after talking to you, she really came to understand that you were about protecting the product. You weren't coming in to change everything. So if there's any WSU wrestlers who might be listening to this podcast that you haven't gotten a chance to talk with, what would you say to them to maybe allay any of their worries or fears about the future?
Well, I would say that if there's any concerns that they have specifically, and this not only is extended an invitation that's extended to the wrestlers, but to the fans as well. If fans or wrestlers alike have any concerns about the operation of WSU going forward, please do not hesitate to contact me. I would love to discuss it because I'd like to know what some of these concerns are, because maybe they're not even concerns that I'm aware of. With that said, even though this deal came together rather quickly, we have been very prepared. I mean, we worked tirelessly pretty much for 3 weeks nonstop to make sure that everything was going to be good to go by June 18th, which is the day that we signed the papers. But I mean, if there's any wrestlers that have any concerns, I would just continue to assure them that, I did not take over operations of WSU to make changes. If I wanted to make drastic changes, I would have started a new promotion or I would have started a new division within Beyond Wrestling. I want to make sure to treat the wrestlers and the current fan base as well with as much respect and as dignity as they deserve. I want to make sure to do the brand right. And I mean, it's a large brand with a built-in fan base, and that's because people like the product. So rather than changing the product, I want to give them more. I want to make sure that it's more accessible. I want to run more live events. I want to increase distribution. I want to beef up the online presence. And at the end of the day, what that hopefully is going to translate into is to more work for the wrestlers on board, more money in their pockets, and more opportunities for them. So certainly not trying to change too much, just trying to do what I can to improve it.
Now, with Beyond Wrestling, you have all these tools available to you. You have the HD filming, you have Smart Mark Video and YouTube connections. WSU, it's not like you're inheriting a jalopy here. WSU has partnerships with iPay-per-view companies. First part, are you going to continue presenting WSU on iPay-per-view? And second, are you going to also use this as a jumping point for Beyond Wrestling to enter into iPay-per-view?
That's interesting that you brought that up. And in fact, a lot of people, I mean, obviously I can understand why they would be concerned with WSU first and foremost, with it having more visibility than Beyond Wrestling, depending the way you want to evaluate it. But absolutely, I'm definitely looking at the options being able to increase distribution for Beyond Wrestling and increase visibility for Beyond Wrestling as well through this partnership. But with that said, yes, I definitely think that we're going to continue to do the iPay-per-views as long as we can present something that is worth the money that the fans are plopping down to watch it. And I still think that the iPay-per-view market in general is a little bit wonky. All the kinks haven't been worked out, and it remains to be seen whether or not that's ever going to be 100% possible, or if, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, we're still going to be encountering some of these issues, and that's just going to be a byproduct of the medium.
All right. WSU has a lot of history behind it, and usually when you see these kind of mergers, takeover sales, you see promoters going through the back catalog and putting out best ofs and such. Is that something you're interested in or looking at?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need to be careful with the way that we manage the tape library going forward. There's already a good number of best ofs that already exist. So I think it's more important to try and go through the footage and see what the best way that we can highlight it is. Something I'm interested in doing is figuring out different ways to introduce it through new online platforms. I think that women's wrestling in general, not just WSU, is sort of, even though it's an internet-based organization, the way that the content is distributed on the internet could certainly be more interactive. It could be more palatable, and that's something that I hope to be able to do, especially knowing that we have 5 years of tapes basically that we're sitting on now that we can work with. We are currently in the process of trying to put together a best of Miss April, who is AJ in WWE, and I guess based on the reception for that one, would sort of determine what compilations we're going to be putting together going forward. Just as being able to go back and re-release some of this footage as MP4 downloads on SmartMark Video, as well as through their video on demand service, will sort of dictate what we're going to be doing going forward, how we're going to be shooting these shows, what we're going to be keeping in mind in order to be able to make the presentation as positive as possible for upcoming events.
I sort of opened with a question about tournament for tomorrow, but I also want to sort of bring it back to that. Have any of the WSU wrestlers actually reached out to you about that when they caught wind of this merger? They specifically talked to you about that yet? And if so, can you disclose what names, or do you want that to be a surprise?
No, I like to keep that a surprise for now. It's going to be very careful the way that we handle the build towards the tournament for tomorrow. So I don't want to get too much information out there before we're ready to do it. But yes, when we announced it, we did have certain wrestlers that also compete for WSU reach out to us about competing in it, and obviously those wrestlers will certainly be featured, as well as hopefully we'll have a few surprises up our sleeve too. I'm more concerned with what we're going to be putting together on the male side of things, to be perfectly honest with you, because there's a shitload of guys that wrestle for Beyond Wrestling that are really deserving of the spot, and it with me being more familiar with them, as opposed to them coming forward and asking for it, it's going to be the decision-making process in that regard is going to be a little bit more difficult than the female competitors that sort of volunteer to do it. Because obviously I wouldn't want to push any competitors into a situation that they weren't necessarily comfortable with, and the intergender matches aren't going to be for everybody.
All right. Let's taking a look specifically at the WSU roster. Can you tell us what you think about just your champions for now? Marty Bell, who's the Spirit champion, Sassy Stephanie and Allison Kay, your tag champions, and Jessica Havoc, your world champion. Just they've had a lot of progress in the past year or so, and Jessica Havoc might be the hottest wrestler in the country right now. So just give us your perspective on each of those wrestlers right now.
Sure, I'll start with Marty Bell. I actually met her a few years ago, and we had gone back and forth about her possibly competing for Beyond Wrestling when she had first started, and it's just unfortunately, timing-wise, something that never came to fruition. But she actually did the last Beyond Wrestling event, and there are some female wrestlers that seem to be, let's say, more concerned with the business side of things than the actual in-ring aspect to professional wrestling, and that's fine. I completely respect the fact that the people that are in wrestling to make money. That's not what the Beyond Wrestling project is about. That is what the WSU project is going to be about. But with that said, Marty Bell is somebody that has taken so many strides in making sure to up her in-ring ability. And, I mean, she's constantly training and constantly working harder because she wants to be a skilled competitor in the ring. She's not somebody who just wants to sell 8x10s or get modeling gigs or whatever the case may be. Like, she wants to be a good wrestler, and I have tons of respect for that. Excuse me, and I think it's awesome that she was able to win the Spirit title at the Uncensored Rumble. I think that she's going to be a great representative for the up and coming athletes that are going to be filling out the undercard on the WSU events. As far as Allison Kay and Sassy Steph go, again, I'm more familiar with Allison Kay because she's also competed for Beyond Wrestling than Sassy Stephanie. But Sassy Stephanie is a very tenured competitor from the Midwest scene. She has gone through a number of transformations, and from the time that I first met her and first saw her, compared to what she's doing now, has been an unbelievable transformation. So I think that both of them are deserving to be the tag team champions. And Allison Kay is another one who is just looking for the opportunity to get better and better. Jessica Havoc, I'm almost afraid to even talk about her because I don't want to say the wrong thing because I don't want her to kick my ass. Like, she's a world beater. You know what I mean? Like, I feel bad that I have to be the one that's going to end up making the decision. Like, oh, sorry, so and so, I have to put you across the ring from Jessica Havoc tonight because you're going to get eaten alive. I think that she is another outspoken individual. I think that being outspoken isn't necessarily a bad quality. It's something that garners a lot of attention, and Jessica Havoc has a pretty substantial fan base, and she's brought a lot of eyes to the WSU product, and so she's definitely going to be featured heavily going forward as long as she can remain champion. And as it stands right now, who's going to be able to defeat her for that title belt? I don't know.
Now you've made a lot of inroads with Beyond Wrestling in obviously St. Louis Anarchy and a lot of other promotions. How are you going to? How is the landscape looking in all the inroads that you've made, looking for attracting new talent, not just for Beyond, which you've been doing, but also for WSU?
Well, I think this goes back to wanting to branch out and run in different spots around the country rather than just keeping it in the tri-state area, since that'll give the opportunity for some more local wrestlers to get on the cards. And I think also on top of that, it goes back to all of our partnerships that we have with some of the male organizations that we work with through Beyond Wrestling, who may have female wrestling, 3 or 4 girls on the roster that they consider to be special attractions. We might be able to work with them and say, hey, we've got a platform to give this person a full-time opportunity. Who would you suggest? So I'm just hoping that through our networking outlets. But I mean, if there's any competitors that feel, that are listening to this, that feel that they deserve a shot in WSU, like, I would love for them to get a hold of me and, take a look at some of their matches and see if we could set up a tryout, whether it be at a closed Beyond Wrestling taping or at a live WSU event. But I'm definitely interested in trying to work with new talent. I think that that's one of the most exciting things on the independent wrestling scene in general is just like the turnaround time for some of these competitors. It's like, if you take your eyes off the scene for 6 months, there's going to be a dozen wrestlers that you've never even heard of before that are doing great things. And I think it's in the spirit of independent wrestling to make sure that newer competitors have that outlet.
Staying on that subject, what are some of the things you're looking for when that person does send you their tape or does send you that email and say, I want to work for Beyond or WSU?
I want to see a good wrestler. Like I said, whether it's men's wrestling or female wrestling, I want to see good wrestling. I want to see somebody that's dedicated to their craft. I want to see somebody that's going to be continuing to train, that's going to be trying to work as many weekends as they can to hone their skill. If it's somebody who just has a pretty face, that might not necessarily be, you know what I mean? That's we're not, let them go to WWE. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how we're going to be putting together our roster. I want the best matches possible. So I want the wrestlers that are dedicated to their craft. So, when wrestlers send in their wrestling resume, there's always things like, I've trained with so-and-so. And, the more information we have in that regards is the better.
Speaking of WWE, obviously you have prospects who theoretically would be scouted by WWE or TNA. What kind of contingency plans do you, as a booker, do you have a contingency plan in place just in case, say, Jessica Havoc gets a tryout with TNA and they sign her?
Nope. You just have to be flexible. I mean, you know what I mean? Because one of the things that I've learned by, running Beyond Wrestling is that if you have the opportunity to pull the trigger on something, don't wait. Obviously, in the eyes of the fans, the more you build up something, usually the better the payoff. But in independent wrestling, unless you're dealing with contracts, even if you are dealing with contracts, that's not always an option. So, I mean, it's important whenever you have the opportunity to run a match, absolutely do so. And I mean, I think that part of the responsibility of a good promoter is that they need to make sure that all of the competitors on the roster look strong, because you never need to know who's going to need to step up and fill that spot that might be open, and not just people getting signed by organizations, overseas tours that might spring up last minute, injuries. I mean, there's always so many changes that come about. You just have to be flexible, and being flexible means having a roster that you can rely on.
All right. Looking back at the roster again, who are some wrestlers that aren't, say, your Mercedes Martinez or your Jessica Havoc's that you're looking forward to working with? Some of the hidden gems in WSU.
Sure. I mean, going back to Marty Bella, it seems like just now, she is starting to break out, and obviously that being a champion, she's going to be more featured going forward. I think that Lexus is an incredibly gifted competitor, and I really hope that she is given the opportunity. I mean, it seems almost like what opportunity she wasn't given. Um, she sort of just took herself, and I mean that's something that you can respect. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, there's a certain way to go about doing things, but you've got to respect the people that are going to go out of their way to make sure that their name gets out there, and make sure that they get known. Somebody like Athena, obviously coming off her big win at the Queens of the Queens tournament, is somebody I hope that we get to see more. Um, I'm interested in competitors that are coming from out of the area. I think that Luscious Latasha, she's really good. I mean, she's been on a number of tour Japan, and I don't know if she's necessarily ever gotten a fair shake in WSU, sort of because it's like, oh well, you never know when she might go back and we might lose her, but it's like, no, that, like, give her more opportunities as a result. Like, if she's doing awesome things, like, let her kill it stateside while she's here. And of course, like, being able to work with LaFisto and Calamity, like, that's awesome too. So I don't know, man. I could say nice things about everybody on the roster, but for the sake of time, I guess I'll stop myself there. And that's certainly not intended as a slight to anybody that I didn't mention by name.
Um, on the same vein of Les's question, um, what talent out there that's not currently working for WSU or hasn't worked for WSU yet do you want to get in fold and try and promote and have matches under your
Um,
banner?
I don't know how familiar you guys are with Addie Starr from ISW. She had a match with a competitor by the name of Shitty. It was a Lego death match when we actually did our first live event. It was a double header with ISW in Danbury, Connecticut last year, and the brutality that she was willing to endure was remarkable. And I think that just based on her toughness alone, she could easily win over the fans of WSU. On top of that, we've been working with a competitor by the name of Mercedes KV up in the New England area, who is only a few years in, but based on this is really a testament to just everybody that's come through the New England Pro Wrestling Academy. Is like, they are, you would never be able to guess their level of experience just by watching them wrestle. And Brian Fury, who's the head trainer there, has just done an incredible job teaching his students so quickly. But I mean, her video, she did a match. It was against Brian Fury, Makaze, and Nick Fahrenheit. It was a 4-way. It was one of the most popular videos that we've ever posted on the Beyond Wrestling YouTube channel. So she's somebody that I would definitely like to get in the fold going forward. And then, there's other people that we've reached out to, but, I don't want to bring them up by name. Just, I'm very superstitious. Unless something seems like it's a done deal, I usually hate bringing it up, because if anything can go wrong, it will.
And you just mentioned your YouTube channel. Of course, Beyond YouTube channel is maybe the fifth most watched channel in all of wrestling.
That's correct. It's the fifth most watched behind TNA, WWE, New Japan, and Ring of Honor, in that order, for any wrestling promotion in the world. And I mean, that's an accomplishment that we are extremely proud of.
All right, so I'll give you a two-part question. One, will you try to do similar things with WSU by putting on more full matches on their YouTube channel? And two, WSU has done a very good job of having a lot of the women do the YouTube promo. Jessica Havoc's an expert at this. And will we keep seeing that going forward? Because it does a lot to bridge the gap between shows and keep fans engaged during the lull periods.
Yeah, I'll comment on the second part of the question first. Absolutely. I think that those promos are good ways to give the wrestlers the full creative control that they need to properly portray what it is that they want to portray. I think that one of the criticisms that I have, and this isn't just for WSU, but for some other organizations, is that sometimes it's like, okay, it's the week of the show, and then 12 of these videos will pop up, and it's not always digestible in that format. So I hope it's the type of thing that the storylines are consistent enough in between live events that there's new videos being released every week. Going back to what you had initially asked, whether it's borrowing from the 5 years of shows that we've just acquired, or whether we're going to be going and shooting stuff in mind specifically, yes, we are going to be releasing way more content on YouTube than ever before, and I want to make sure that we have the strongest online presence of any wrestling promotion, whether female or otherwise, for any independent wrestling promotion. That's one of my goals that I'm working towards.
Uh, in the same vein as what was just asked again, um, another company that has a strong online presence, probably similar to yours, if not, I guess maybe since they're more established, they have maybe a stronger one, even though they don't have the YouTube hits, is Chikara. And it's not just YouTube promos. They have like featurettes, like the barber shop, and they have like blogs that they have the wrestlers write. Is there any plans to make the online content a little more diversified? Maybe not so much as totally copying what Jakar is doing, but maybe taking a few cues from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that something that you almost got to give Colt Cabana credit for it is that it's interesting to see how much different wrestling related content you can come up with outside of the confines of an actual in ring match, and I think that. Something that we've been exploring with Beyond Wrestling recently on our YouTube channel is this Magical Moment show, which is hosted by Jericho 120, one of our most popular wrestlers that has recently relocated to the West Coast. So obviously we want to keep him in the fold. And now that we have 3 years of footage basically to fall back on for Beyond Wrestling, you know, we're figuring out different ways to repackage it to make it more appealing and to use the past to go towards the future. So I could definitely see, besides putting up free matches, putting up previews, putting up promos, putting up behind the scenes footage. I mean, there's a number of different programming options that I would love to pursue. There's only so many hours in the day, but it is one of my top priorities to make sure that the online content is there. Especially again because with women's wrestling in general, I feel like so much of the fan base is drawn from the internet. Yet at the same time, there's not as much information or content out there to appease the fans in between shows. I'm going to take one more question from each of you guys. I just want to get things wrapped up.
All right. So let's say you have a lot of Beyond fans already. What would you tell the fans who maybe don't watch your intergender matches, just focus on the men's matches? What would you say to them to get them into WSU?
My goal with WSU in terms of how we're going to present the in-ring product is to try and be as innovative and progressive as we've had been since starting Beyond Wrestling. I don't want people to be watching WSU and going, "Oh, this is good." ... for women's wrestling. I don't want there to be a qualifier. I want people to say, "Wow, this is good." And for the fans that follow Beyond Wrestling, some of these more innovative elements are hopefully going to be spilling into the WSU as we continue the takeover within the next few months. So anybody that supported Beyond Wrestling in the past, I would hope that even if women's wrestling is not their cup of tea, that they would keep an open mind and check it out once some of these improvements are in place.
And just we're closing things up right now. As a callback to beginning of the interview, um, how are you going to? How are you going to help change perception and maybe try and get people to look at women's wrestling not as women's wrestling, but just as wrestling? Because you have a perfect opportunity to do this with the dual companies, and there's just like so much of a stigma against women's wrestling right now that it's really unfair to these amazing performers. Now, what's your do you have a plan of action, or is it just
Well, I
going?
mean, yeah, you've already just touched on it to a bit. I mean, something that makes WSU unique compared to any other wrestling organization is now we have not only a men's promotion to utilize to promote WSU. But Beyond Wrestling is a promotion that has been built specifically on being innovative, on being progressive, on being different, and I think the fans understand and appreciate that. So, it's a bit different. Whereas, let's say Dragon Gate USA was to start promoting Shine, or if Evolve was starting to promote Shine, the product they present is different than what Beyond Wrestling presents. So the audience they attract is different than the audience that Beyond Wrestling has attracted. And I think that the type of fans that we have attracted are we built a good enough relationship with them that they're going to entrust our endeavors going forward, and that they're going to be confident enough in our ability that they're going to be willing to give us a shot to see how the two brands will act separately, as well as when there are crossover events. I mean, obviously, before we even announced the WSU acquisition, tournament of tomorrow too got a significant amount of buzz, just based on the success of the first tournament for tomorrow, and also based on some of the intergender wrestling that we've posted in the past. So I don't see why this would be any differently going forward.
All right. Well, I just want to take a moment to thank you, Drew, for giving us this time to ask you these questions. And I hope any fans listening to this have had most of their questions answered. But if you have any more, I would do what Drew suggested. Contact him at Beyond Wrestling on Twitter. He's very open, very engaging. He'll answer any questions you have. And I just want to say thank you for giving us this time.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Thomas, go ahead.
Thanks a lot. I want to thank you too. It's been our pleasure. As a journalist, I don't even consider myself a journalist. I consider myself a fan who actually writes stuff. But as someone like that, I appreciate this endeavor. I'm looking very much forward to it.
Yeah, I know. I want to make myself as accessible as possible for anybody that has any, questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions. Again, if you want to tweet at Beyond Wrestling for the time being, or send an email to beyondwrestling@gmail.com, wherever this podcast may end up, whether it ends up on Beyond Wrestling's YouTube, the Dirty Dirty Sheets website, the wrestling blog, Cageside Seats, or all of those different affiliates. If anybody has any questions that they would prefer to direct towards Thomas or Leslie, to be the filter, please make sure to forward that information to them as well. And, I can guarantee it'll get back to me. And I mean, hopefully going forward, as we have more announcements, I'd love to be able to do individual question and answers, whether it's written interviews or whatever it is that you guys may reach out to your individual fan bases, to make myself and make the WSU brand as accessible as possible. So again, thank you guys for your time. Have a good night.
Thanks.
You too, man.